I'm Matt Ellman, and you're listening to the Complete Confidence with Cambridge podcast. We've got lots of useful tips and tricks to help you plan your school year as you prepare your learners for their Cambridge English qualifications. Whether you've been teaching exam classes for years or just at the start of your teaching career, come along with us. We'll help you unpack the English language exam journey using our own real-life experience and easy-to-follow examples from the exam preparation course Complete. So, let's get started. Today's episode is brought to you by me, Matt Ellman. I'm the Professional Learning and Development Manager at Cambridge, designing and delivering training for teachers, institutions and ministries of education around the world. I've worked as a teacher and trainer in the UK, Spain and Malaysia, and I've delivered courses, workshops and talks in around 30 countries. Hi everyone, and welcome to this episode which rounds off our series on the B2 First exam. Today we're talking about preparation for exam day. We'll discuss how you can help your learners manage their nerves before the big day, how you can use the B2 First handbook and videos on the Cambridge English website to help your learners prepare. And finally, we'll look specifically at the speaking exam and how you can prepare your learners for what is often considered one of the hardest parts of the whole test. So what can you do to help your learners manage their nerves when it comes to the day of their B2 First exam? Helping them understand what to expect is key here, because often many of the nerves and the apprehension that they feel comes from not really knowing what to expect on the day itself. So one really useful resource that Cambridge produces here is the mock exam toolkit, and you can find this at cambridgeenglish.org. And if you click on the B2 First exam and preparation, the mock test toolkit takes you through preparing for a mock test and then actually giving your students a mock B2 First test, which would include reading and use of English, writing and listening papers, as well as a speaking paper. It explains how you can mark those papers for your learners. And then very importantly, it also explains how you can give your learners feedback on the exam once they've done it, and they have the opportunity to complete a self-evaluation form as well. So this is a great way to help your learners understand what to expect, of course, on the day itself, so that it feels less daunting, but also it's a good way of helping them understand where they are in terms of their readiness for the exam. It's something that you can do over a period of time, or it's something that you can do all in one go. Another great resource for helping your learners understand what to expect on exam day is Test and Train, and this is included as part of their complete package on Cambridge One. Test and Train allows you to administer each of the papers for the B2 First exam, and because Test and Train lives on Cambridge One, it's able to provide instant feedback to your learners on most of the papers as part of the test. The second element that we want to consider when we're preparing learners for exam day is the B2 First handbook and the B2 First speaking videos. Both of these are available on the Cambridge English website. As part of the handbook, you can see an example writing test, and you can see sample answers to that writing test along with the examiner's comments and scores. And this is a really valuable resource that you should share with your learners. What you can do is provide, first of all, the exam task to the learners and invite them to think about what they might write when they answer it. Then you can give them the sample answers and ask them to be the examiner and to assess that writing based on the same criteria that the examiner will use. Finally, you can share the examiner's scores and get your learners to compare. And often when you do this, what you see is that the learners have been far more critical than the examiner and have awarded far lower scores than the examiner has. So this whole exercise is often very, very beneficial for your learners' confidence, because what they see is that actually the examiner is not expecting them to write perfect English in the exam. The examiner is looking for B2 level English. You can do a similar thing with the speaking test videos, again found on the Cambridge English website and accompanied by the examiner's comments. Watching these videos allows the learners to understand what happens during a speaking test, and again, they can attempt to assess the candidates that they see in the videos and give them a score and compare that with the scores provided by the examiner and their comments. And often the same process happens whereby your learners will be overcritical of the candidates that they see, and they'll be quite surprised, pleasantly surprised, when they see the scores and comments that the examiner has actually given. So both of these exercises are about calibrating your learners' expectations to the expectations of the examiner in the B2 First exam. And often that's a pleasant process because it's a confidence building realization that the examiner is not looking for perfect English. They're looking for B2 level English. Continuing on the theme of speaking, the speaking paper is often the paper that is most daunting for learners when they're taking the B2 First exam. So there are a few things that they can bear in mind during the exam itself in order to reduce nerves and make sure that they do as well as possible. One of the most important elements of the speaking test is discourse management. And this is the idea that when you speak, you're not just stringing together a list of isolated sentences. You're producing a text, and often producing a text in collaboration with somebody else. That's something that the B2 First speaking paper tests very specifically, because in each speaking exam, there are two candidates talking to the examiner. So it's really important that learners appreciate how they should work with the other candidate, which is someone they may know or may not know on exam day, in order to get a good mark. What the examiner will be looking for is for candidates to link what they say to what the other candidate says, as well as linking what they say with what they've already said. Something that candidates should really bear in mind is language for comparison. The examiner will provide them with pictures that they have to compare, but candidates should also be aware that they can compare what they say with what the other candidate has said as well. So the comparison is between their responses as well as between the pictures. Another key difficulty that candidates have in the speaking exam is simply thinking of what to say, coming up with content for their answers. And a really useful strategy for overcoming this is to consider each aspect, each picture or each topic from 3 different angles. Candidates can think about the social aspect of the topics that they're given to discuss. They can consider the psychological aspect, how it makes them feel or how it makes other people feel. And they can consider the economic aspect, how expensive or how cheap are these things to do, for example. So to give you an example of this, I'm looking at page 24 of Complete B2 First Students Book. And on this page, we've got a sample speaking part 2 question. We've got an image of 2 women playing computer games, and we've got an image of a man and a woman kayaking. And the question is, how can the people benefit from spending their free time doing these different activities? So if we consider these pictures from a social perspective, we might say that in both images, we see people socializing as part of taking part in these activities. If we consider them from a psychological perspective, then we could say that the women playing the computer game are obviously having a good time, they're quite happy, but they're also quite energized, and the computer game is something that's kind of building up their energy, whereas for the people kayaking, this is perhaps more of a calming activity, and it looks like something they might do to relax more. And when it comes to the economic side, we might say that computer games can be quite expensive. Buying a games console is not cheap, whereas perhaps kayaking is cheaper, but perhaps it also just depends on where you are and your access to water and those kinds of resources, for example. So using this approach to compare each topic and consider each topic from 3 different angles is a really useful way of helping your learners generate content during their speaking exam. It's also worth mentioning that the examiner in the speaking test is not interested in whether what the candidates say is true or not. So your candidates can say whatever they like about themselves or their own feelings, or their own experiences. It's the language that the examiner is going to be focusing on. For some learners, this is a helpful tip. It's a helpful realization. For others, it doesn't help because then they start to think about making things up instead of just simply communicating. But it's an important thing to highlight that the examiner is examining language. It's not a test of character. Let's recap. So that wraps up this episode on preparing for the B2 First exam. We've looked at how you can help your learners manage their nerves on exam day. We've looked at how you can use the B2 First handbook and speaking test videos to help them prepare. And we've talked about a couple of things that they can do during the speaking exam in order to get the best mark possible. I hope you found this useful. And the final podcast in the series will be a group session with myself, Greg and Olha. Good luck in your exams and all the best. That's it for today. Discover more episodes from this series on our website, cambridge.org/completeconfidence. We have podcast episodes for every level of the Cambridge exams. Come back and join us again soon. And don't worry, you've got this.
You've been listening to the Complete Confidence with Cambridge podcast, brought to you by Cambridge University Press and Assessment.